So, how's your 40ing going? No, seriously. How's your 40ing going? Hi, and welcome to Catholic Moment. The reason why I'm asking you the question this way is that I've just recently realized that the word for quarantine actually has its root in the number 40. This is more evident in French, where the word for quarantine, la quarantaine, is actually the exact same word we use to talk about a 40 of something, une quarantaine. And the more I pondered this notion of quarantine and 40 being one and the same, the more I began to realize that there was a biblical significance, that a quarantine, a separation from, and une quarantaine, a 40 of something, had biblical significance. Now, it doesn't take a biblical scholar to see the significance of the number 40 in sacred scripture. I mean, when I teach my class about Noah's Ark and I ask them to tell me everything that they know about the story of Noah and the Ark, they're readily able to tell me that it rained for 40 days. And as we move through the Old Testament and we study Moses and the flight from Egypt, my students are also able very easily to tell me that Moses and the Israelites were 40 years in the desert. When we begin to study the life of Jesus, I even have a few students who are able to share with the class that Christ began his earthly ministry by fasting alone for 40 days in the desert. And it's when we keep all of this in mind, I love the look on my students' faces when we look at the end of Christ's earthly ministry, and that after his resurrection, Jesus appeared to the disciples over the course of 40 days before his ascension into heaven. Now, what is the significance of all of these biblical 40s? Well, when we look at it, the flood forced Noah and his family into 40 days of quarantine on the ark. And Moses and the Hebrews were forced into 40 years of quarantine in the desert. Jesus himself chose to be in quarantine for 40 days in the desert. And then also, too, Christ had to be quarantined in a way from his disciples for 40 days after the resurrection because they weren't quite ready for his glory. What do these biblical quarantines mean for us? Well, we need to look at what a quarantine is. A quarantine is a time of separation and isolation from the rest of humanity to purify the body, to renew our body so that we can continue life again afterwards, but in a way that's forever changed. The more I thought about the notion of this time of quarantine being a time of purification and the number 40, each time I thought of the number 40, the word fortification or fortify tumbled from my lips. And so these quarantines are a time not only of purification, but also of fortification, of fortifying oneself for the life that's to come after. The more I contemplated the biblical quarantines of Noah on the ark and the Israelites in the desert and Jesus himself in the desert and the time from the resurrection to the ascension, the more I came to deeply understand that these biblical quarantines, God was giving humanity a time of purification and fortification to prepare itself for a new beginning in his saving plan for humanity. So as we come to an end ourselves to these 40 days of Lent, une quarantaine de jours, I pray that it's been a time of purification and fortification for a new beginning in God's saving plan after Easter. And as we look at the quarantine that the world finds itself in today, I pray that the world comes to understand this time as a time of purification and a time of fortification for a new beginning when this is all said and done in God's saving plan for humanity. I'm Robert Leblanc, and this has been a Catholic Moment.